Hey guys, it's Allie. I want to talk about some of the books I read in the past few months. I feel like a quarterly wrap up is much easier because I don't always have a lot to say about each book that I read. And normally I read 3 to 5 books a month. So this video is going to be the books I read from the beginning of January to the end of March. That means I have 14 books to review, so we might as well get started. The very first book that I read this year was called The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. The gist of this plot is that it's a fantasy world. These two warriors carry an ancient god across the world to end the tyrannical reign of a royal family. This royal family, they're called the Moon Throne. They consist of the emperor and his 3 sons. These 3 sons are called the Three Terrors. They've been wreaking havoc across their land for years, taking advantage of their people, installing fear. And these 3 sons all have powers because their mom, who is an ancient goddess, she's basically locked in the palace basement. So the emperor had children with this god. The god passed on some of her power to her kids, and her kids are using the powers for bad things. The 2 warriors that we follow, their names are June and Kima. June is an ex-soldier of this empire, and he carries a lot of guilt with him about the choices that he made while he was a soldier. So with Kima, the 3 terrors destroyed his village and killed his people. So he has been wanting revenge, and he's sort of been a rogue nomad ever since. And they end up meeting each other and the god, and they have 5 days to travel with this god and end the reign of the Moon Throne. And that's all I'm going to give you because I want you all to read it. I enjoyed absolutely everything about this book. I think the world and the folklore is fleshed out really well, and the characters had enough of them to where we can distinguish different voices, and the journey from day 1 through day 5 was entertaining and very thoughtful. Right off the bat, we do not get a lot of background information on any of these characters. They're sort of written for the moment. There are little pieces of background we get from June and the mother, which is the god that we're talking about. We have a little bit of an idea about their past, but not much with any of the other characters. And I don't think this takes away from the book much because this story has so many other elements that add to the book's complexity. What I do want to highlight is the relationship development between these 2 characters. This drove the story more than the context, the conflict, or the closure. The concept of love as a living, breathing, multi-dimensional thing is the main theme here. I also think it's very important to mention that the symbolism of freedom is often being depicted as a bird taking flight, and this sort of ties into some of the plot twists towards the end, which is fun. Lastly, the meta aspect that tells the story within a story is also fun. I think it adds useful layers to the plot and the relationships between the characters. Overall, I absolutely love this. I give it 4.5 stars. It was beautiful and a great start to my reading year. Next book I read has been on my TBR ever since it was announced. It is called Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I picked this up and I wanted to read it because one of my favorite books is Vicious by the same author. I love that book, and I was hoping that I would also love this one. This book is pitched as a toxic lesbian vampire story, which is intriguing on its own, but once you actually get into the story a bit, there are a lot of layers. There are 3 point of views in this book. The first point of view is from a woman named Maria. The book starts with her story. She lived in the year 1532. The second point of view is from a woman named Lottie. Her story starts in the year 1827. And then our last main character is named Alice, and her starts in the year 2019. So these 3 women turn into vampires one way or another, and they learn to navigate a life that has no ending. I guessed that I was going to like this story, and I was right. I do love lesbian vampires. Right off the bat, I appreciated how much time we got with each of these main characters because it lets the audience understand why they act and think the way they do. I also find it makes for a more cohesive story when character arcs are fully explored. The issue, though, is that all of the POVs weren't evenly dispersed, if that makes sense. Alice was present for the whole book. Meanwhile, it was mainly Maria in the beginning of this book and Lottie at the end. I just wish we got all of them simultaneously and more evenly. For the most part, the endings for each character were on brand for their arc. I do think that Maria's character at the end felt a little too twirly mustache for me. The moral of this story was the best part of this book, in my opinion. The most beautiful parts of humanity are beautiful because they are finite. They don't last forever. And if you have to give up your soul for freedom, are you truly free? In the end, I gave this a 3.5 stars. I thought it was good, despite having some issues with it. Next book was a book club pick. I am in a book club and we mainly read the classics. I feel like I'm severely lacking in that genre, so I felt like it was easier for me to read these classics when I have a discussion board, when I have other people to bounce ideas off of, so it's really helped. I'll have a link to the book club below. It's run in Fable. It's run by a woman named Claire, and she is great. The book we read is called Eichmann in Jerusalem by Hannah Arendt. This is basically Arendt's report on the 1961 trial of Nazi leader Adolf Eichmann. He was an SS officer and he organized the logistics of the Holocaust, including transportation of Jews to ghettos and extermination camps. This was my first exposure to Hannah Arendt's philosophy, specifically the concept of the banality of evil. Additionally, I had little to moderate background knowledge or understanding of the inner functions of the Third Reich and the development of the quote-unquote final solution. This book was very dense, very serious, so I could only read a chapter or two at a time, and then I needed more time to reflect on what I read. I thought this was a great pick for book club because the concepts in this book reflect our current state of affairs, especially in America. At the end, my takeaway was this: evil does not usually present itself as a fantastical boogeyman with sharp teeth and claws. Each of us has the capacity for evil deeds. Those who commit the most horrendous and malicious crimes oftentimes look and sound like everybody else. And I think what shocked the author the most was that Eichmann, who was partially, responsible for the Holocaust and the evacuation and extermination of the Jewish people, presented so normal. He presented so average. Eichmann's story taught me that there is something so sinister in complacency, in blind loyalty, and lack of social and emotional perception. Overall, great pick for book club. I gave it 4 stars. Last book in January was a cozy fantasy called The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. I got this book in an Owl Crate box. So again, this book is a cozy fantasy about a nomad fortune teller and her journey into finding a found family and a place where she belongs. This fortune teller, her name is Tao. She is sort of hiding from a complicated past. What she does for a living as she travels to small towns and tells small fortunes. Examples of small fortunes are whether it will rain next week, whether the crops will grow, little things like that. She meets other wanderers and travelers, and she ends up being a part of a search for a little girl who is lost. Now, I have not read much cozy fantasy, and I usually find myself picking up stories with a little more depth and stakes. First of all, I really enjoyed the themes introduced in this story. The immigrant experience, loss of a parent, loss of hope and meaning in your life. I respect the story for what it is, but I finished the book wanting more. I find deeper meaning in higher stakes and deeper character development. I definitely felt the magic, but I would have loved the story if it were less cozy. I just don't think cozy fantasy is for me, but I will keep trying to see if I can find one that absolutely smashes it out of the park. In the end, I gave this book 2.5 stars. That's it for January. Let's move on to February. I read 5 books in February, and 3 of those books were a trilogy. Books 5 through 7 were the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I've been wanting to read these books for forever, and I was told by everybody on the internet that these books are fantastic. The 3 books are called The Fifth Season, The Obelisk Gate, and The Stone Sky. The plot and world is very complicated, and it is very hard to describe it, but I will do the best I can without spoiling anything. Basically, this takes place in a futuristic world that suffers through periodic natural disasters. They call them seasons. The book starts with a huge crack in the earth right through the middle of the capital city of this world. The capital city is called Eumenes. That is within the first chapter or so of the book. Our main character, her name is Isun. Her story starts with her coming home from work. She works as a teacher. Her coming home from work to finding her young son unalived by her husband, and her daughter vanished, presumably with him. And that's really all we get in the beginning. The magic system is similar to earthbending and metal bending from the Avatar world, but these people more manipulate the energy produced by the earth rather than the earth itself. That's the best way I can describe it, and you will get more of that once you start reading. It's beautiful and complicated, and I loved it. I'm reading the whole series. The whole series was near perfection. The writing was beautiful. The themes were impactful. All the things you want in an epic story, this series had. The next book I read, not so much. The next book I read was The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Peterson. I'm going to get into spoilers because I had very specific things that I didn't like with the plot. I gave it a 1.5 stars. I didn't love it. If you don't want to be spoiled, then I would skip until this timestamp. So the main character, her name is Bristol. She lives with her 2 sisters in a town called Bow's Keep. Both her parents have died, but not really. Bristol gets a letter from a distant aunt offering help with the bills because they're currently struggling right now. She gets sucked into a fantasy fairy world where her parents are not who she thought they were. She meets a fake king. He's grumpy, he has a dark past, and they fall in love. This was so messy and way too long, and that's wild for me to say because the author left all the important details off page. What could you possibly be writing when you're not giving anything at all?
And here we go. I hope you're hungry for nothing.
As always, I will start with the things I liked about this book. The main thing that intrigued me so much was that there is shapeshifter magic here, and I love shapeshifter magic. I felt that it added a new layer of complexity to the Fae world, and I thought it was really fun. This Fae world has similar qualities to every other Fae world you've read in a romantasy, but the shapeshifter stuff was special to me. All right. Let's get to the things I would have probably changed or the parts that I did not like. So first of all, once she realizes that her dad is not dead, her dad is in fact alive, and he's in the fairy world, she goes to her sisters and is like, you won't believe this, dad is alive and he's in fairyland? And we assume that these two are going to be shocked, like, we don't believe you, there's a fairyland? This does not happen. Her 15-year-old sister is like, perfect, I have a book that explains all the fairy rules. How convenient.
Secret recipe for one Krabby Patty is a pinch of salt. Clayton, wait! 3 teaspoons of chopped onions. I'm warning you. A cup of love. Don't do it. Mixed together with the most important ingredient of all, 4 heaping pounds of freshly ground plankton.
So she hands her this book, like, oh, I conveniently have this book, It has everything you need to do in fairy world. Don't worry, I'm giving you all the answers. Like they skip past the part of, you know, unbelievability and immediately take Bristol at her word. And they live in like a normal Earth with no magic. Second of all, none of these side characters matter. There's too many, and there's really no important character development with any of them. So they're just archetypes, and it's really unfortunate. Even the FMC and the MMC are like that. And their romance development was completely off page, if you can believe it. That's what I mean when I say this is a lot of words for a book that says nothing at all. So basically, their relationship, they are at odds with each other in the beginning, but their relationship develops via nighttime dancing on the terrace, and he is also invisible.
And my wife, Juniper, and I have been married now for 12 years.
While they do this. So to anyone looking, she's literally just, you know, dancing with herself, whispering to herself.
A lot of people don't see Juniper the way I do. Love you.
And we don't get the inner conversations between them. We just know that this is happening and that they're growing closer. The whole time I was reading, I was like, you know, let me in. Let me see what they're saying so I can believe that they're in love at the end. Give me something, because right now it's giving nothing. Also, there is a weird time jump in between Earthworld and Fairyland. Time works differently. And the reason why I found this weird was that we find out that the main Fae King, his name is Taigen, he was best friends with Bristol's dad. They were besties. They became estranged because Bristol's dad stabbed Taigen. He basically stabbed his best friends in the back and then GTFO'd. It freaked me out because only 6 months had passed between Taigen getting stabbed by Bristol's dad and Bristol and Taigen, you know, meeting, boinking, and then falling in love. Like, damn. That's fucking weird. And whole time, Taigen knew who this girl was. He knew who she was, yet he did it anyway. And I find that fucking weird. Oh, and don't get me started on that ending. So a bunch of secrets, you know, get aired out. And Bristol is rightfully upset because everybody in her life has been lying to her and keeping things from her. She throws a huge fucking fit. And at the end, like, her and Taigen are kind of estranged, and then the book ends with Taigen like laying on his bed, like battling inner demons. Like he's had demons living, and he's got voices in his head because he got poisoned, right? He's fighting his inner demons or whatever. And she hears that Taigen is in trouble, so she like forgets, you know, everything that happened between them. And she bursts into this room, to his bedroom to help him. She helps him fight his demons, which is really sweet until you realize that the way she helps him is by giving him head. And then, I kid you not, the book ends mid-boink. It just cuts off. Like, get fucked. I am confused. I am horrified. And I don't understand. 1.5 stars. Not for me. The last book I read in February was called Wooing the Witch Queen by Stephanie Burgess. Burgess? The way I can describe the start of this book is to do it in reference of other things. So our main character, she's an evil queen, and she spends this book trying to protect her Halloween town from imperialist England. I know that sounds weird, but bear with me. She rules over a land that treats all creatures, whether that be witches, wizards, warlocks, gnomes, mermaids, equally. They're all equal citizens under her rule. The other side of the pond is a kingdom that views any non-humans as less than, basically human supremacy. They're trying to invade her land, which threatens her crown and her people. She's getting a lot of work. She does all her ruling by herself. So she puts in an ad in some fucking newspaper for a dark wizard to be her librarian and basically help her sort through all her shit. A dark wizard shows up at her door. He's actually like a really nice and sweet guy. He's supposed to be like evil, but he's, not bad at all. What we find out, well, the book tells you in the beginning, the dark wizard that accepted her librarian position, he's actually the Archduke of imperialist England, and he is in disguise. As long as he's been Archduke, he has been basically a puppet ruler, and his uncle does all the actual ruling. He basically suffered his entire life under his uncle and his family. He escapes that. I thought the atmosphere in this world was really fun, even if most of the elements in this story were pretty half-baked. It was a quick and easy read with the beginnings of a serious and well-thought-out plot. I just think everything happened too fast. I just wanted more from it. There's one thing that did rub me the wrong way. When the evil queen and this wizard start to become intimate, they sort of did a consent, non-consent act where she magically silences him while she touches him. And I didn't like that because it doesn't give him a chance to express any discomfort or rescinding consent at all. It doesn't give him a chance to voice concern, and it feels very yucky to me. I did not find it sexy. In the end, I gave this book 2 stars. Finally, we're in March and I have 5 books left. The next book I read was a book that has been all over my For You page, all over the internet. Everybody freaking loves this book. And that book is Daggermouth by H.M. Wolf. I have a lot to say about this book, and I need to do it in a separate video because I took notes chapter by chapter. For those of you who don't know, this is a dystopian romantasy marketed as a quote-unquote true enemies to lovers. And there's a lot of readers that felt this way. So I thought, I like dystopian. I'm not too keen on romance, but this, I basically had FOMO. Like, I want to know what's going on. I'm nosy. I want to know what the big hype is about. So I read it, and I have a lot to say. I will include, I'm not going to say my star rating for now, but I'm going to make a separate video on it. Next book is our book club pick for my classics book club. That is The Master and the Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. To make a long story short, the devil and his cronies basically wreak havoc to uncover the corruption and hypocrisies of 1920s Russia under Stalinism. I have to start out by saying that this was the most absurd thing that I have ever read. This whole time, the book is just poking fun at Russian society under Stalinism, and I found that it created a perfect balance of fun antics, suspense, and sentimentality. Bulgakov teaches us that we need to question our reality and our own hypocrisies. Right now, our curriculum in book club is to examine the function of good versus evil, and I think this book does that extremely well. Overall, I had a lot of fun. Last thing I'm going to say is that the cat in this book, he's one of the cronies. He's a walking, talking cat. He takes shots of vodka. He is part of the crew. This cat's name is Behemoth, and I think that is the best cat name in the world. Argue with the wall. At the end, I gave this book 4 stars. It was great. Next book I read was Hamajan Luck by Makina Yamamoto. My full review of this book is the one previous video I have. I gave it 2.5 stars. Next book is called Violeta by Isabel Allende. This book was written in Spanish and I read the English translation. It's been a while since I read historical fiction and it's one of my favorite genres. I am so glad that I actually really enjoyed this. I love a story that spans an entire lifetime. This novel is great for readers who enjoy very detailed character studies, particularly taking place in 20th century South America. Violetta tells her story of her life via letters to someone very important to her. I felt that Allende does a very poignant and carefully researched job of covering major 20th century political events. These include the Great Depression, the Cuban dictatorship, and the Chilean Revolution. My expectation going in was to read about the life of a woman who learned to live for herself and on her own terms, and I was not disappointed. The quotes throughout this book are life-changing. What a beautiful examination of humanity in all its forms. I hope you're seeing a pattern here. I love books that examine humanity and its beauty, but also its toxicity. In the end, I gave it 4 stars. Last book I read in March, and the last book in this video, is called Waiting for the Long Night Moon by Amanda Peters. This was a short story collection by an Indigenous woman about Indigenous American stories. Each of these stories were absolutely beautiful. The writing was beautiful. The themes were well done. The research going in was really good. And I felt it was very emotionally impactful. I would read the trigger warnings for this before picking it up. All in all, I had no complaints. They were beautiful. I gave that book 4 stars. So yeah, that's the end of my quarterly wrap up. I read a good amount of books in the last 3 months. I think I'm going to do something like this again 3 months from now. I'm ready to read more books. Stay tuned for the next video, and I'll talk to you later.